The sky above the riverside town of Bon Uthai was always softest just before the sun rose, a pastel hue of lavender and gray that blurred the edges of the bamboo huts and silent boats. It was at this hour, when the world was between dreams and waking, that the chalk appeared. It was written near the ferry pier, on the wooden planks of the dock, on the school gate, on the stone path that led to the monastery bell. Yamong tau te wela te dern toi long. Don't look at her feet when she walks backward. No one ever saw who wrote it. Every morning it would be there, white, dusty letters scrawled in a child's messy hand. And by afternoon they would fade away, washed off by feet or the brief midday rain. The town's children used to laugh at it. Some thought it was a prank by monks to stop them from skipping school. Others whispered it was written by a ghost child who once drowned in the river. But adults never laughed, especially the elders, especially the ones who had seen the feet. Among those who took it seriously was Suni, the town's quiet herbalist. She lived alone by the old well, surrounded by creeping jasmine and hanging vines. People said she spoke to spirits, though she never confirmed it. She often left salt lines at her gate and tied strings of dried lime and turmeric across her windows. When the chalk returned for the 7th consecutive day one April, she didn't wait. She went door to door before sunrise, clutching a bundle of incense and whispering one warning. If you hear footsteps behind you at dawn, don't turn around. And if you must, don't look down. Some laughed at her. Some nodded politely, thinking she was just another old woman bound to superstition. But that morning, Niran, a delivery man, didn't come home. His motorbike was found parked at the side of the road near the pier, helmet on the seat, engine still warm. His phone? Dropped a few feet away, screen cracked with the flashlight still on. The only clue? Chalk footprints, barefoot, small, pointed backward as if someone had walked in reverse away from the scene. Niran was never found, not his bag, not his body, just his keys lying in the middle of the road next to something no one wanted to acknowledge. His eyes, both, laid carefully on a folded lotus leaf. The town went quiet after that. Vendors opened later. Children were walked to school in silence. No one spoke of the woman, not aloud. But everyone knew the old tale, that once a year, when the air was thick with mist and fish refused to rise, Mae Sao Noi, the backward maiden, would return to walk the morning river path, looking for those who disobeyed the one rule: don't look at her feet. Because her feet, they didn't walk on the ground. They twisted, bent backward at the knee, rotated like broken marionette limbs, each toe curled in reverse, pointed toward you. And if your eyes lingered even a second too long, she would know. 3 days after Niran vanished, Kraiwut, a 10-year-old boy from the edge of town, stopped speaking. He had always been a quiet child, the kind that listened more than talked, but this silence was different. He wouldn't respond to his parents, he wouldn't eat, and he wouldn't stop drawing. He sat on the floor of their wooden house from morning to dusk, sketching with red and black crayons on torn pieces of newspaper, his fingers smudged with ink, his nails crusted with wax. His mother begged him to stop. His father thought it was a phase, but then she saw the drawings. One showed a woman with long hair falling forward, not neatly, not straight, but like wet kelp dragged from the riverbed.
Her arms were by her sides, her hands backward. And beneath her were feet, drawn backward too. Ankles bent wrong, knees facing the wrong way. In every sketch, her feet were the focus. Her feet and something else. Eyes, staring from the ground, staring up, without lids, without faces, only orbs, drawn over and over, next to her footsteps. When Suni heard, she arrived before sunrise, bringing rice water and a bell made from bone. She didn't knock. She simply stepped inside and whispered, "Where did he see her?" The boy looked up finally and pointed to the river path behind their house. Suni's face paled. "That's not where she walks," she said. "That's where she waits." That night, the air in Bon Utai was thick and metallic, like rust. The frogs had stopped croaking. The crickets had gone silent. Not even the river moved. It just sat still under the moonlight, like black glass. At exactly 3:47 a.m., the family's cat let out a shriek. It clawed frantically at the bamboo walls, trying to escape. The boy, still silent, walked calmly to the doorway and pressed his face against the gap. Then he smiled, a wide, empty, stretched smile, and began whispering words his mother couldn't understand. "Turn my now, she's here now." The next morning, the boy was gone. No broken door, no signs of struggle. Just a single pair of bare footprints on the dusty floor, leading backward from the window to the center of the room and stopping at the boy's bed. At the end of the trail, written in thick black crayon on the wall, was a message no one could explain. "I looked, I looked, I looked." And just below it, smeared in something red and sticky, was a perfect imprint of a backward foot. Not drawn, pressed, like someone or something had stood there and smiled.
Long before Bon Utai became known for its whisper legends, the river was its heartbeat. Boats glided silently over the misty surface, ferrying monks, market goods, and secrets alike. The oldest boatman in the village, Chayut, had lived long enough to forget many things, but there was one thing he never forgot. Never be near the river at dawn, when the water doesn't ripple. People assumed he was senile. They didn't know the real reason he rode only before midnight and after sunrise, but never in between. Until one morning, he didn't return. His boat was found drifting, gently spinning in the eddy by the mangrove edge. Its lantern was still lit. The oars were neatly placed inside, but Chayut was nowhere to be seen, except for what was left in the stern. A single sandal, a handful of teeth, and a line of chalk-white footprints, all backward. That day, Sune lit incense at every corner of the town. She placed bowls of rice and candles at each dock, tied white strings to the trees near the river, and sprinkled crushed lemon leaves across the doorways. But it was the shrine behind the temple that received the most attention. An ancient spirit house stood there, decayed and leaning, surrounded by red thread and rusted bells. No one visited it anymore. No one prayed at it, but Sune did. She knelt and offered water, then whispered something no one could hear, except maybe the trees. When she rose, her eyes were wet. She's not just walking anymore. She's searching. That night, two teenagers, Pong and Vina, dared each other to walk the river path at dawn. They laughed about the missing boy, teased each other about Chayut's sandal. Armed with a flashlight and bravado, They crept out just before 5 a.m. At 5:11 a.m., only Veena returned, screaming, barefoot, eyes wide, bleeding at the corners. She couldn't speak, not at first, but when she did, all she could say, over and over, was, "He looked, he looked, he looked." She would not blink, wouldn't sleep, wouldn't stop drawing with her fingers in the air, as if tracing something only she could see. It was always the same movement, curved, looped, ending with two straight lines drawn upside down. It took Sune 3 days to understand. She was tracing a symbol, an old Brahmic glyph, the one that meant reversal of the body, retention of the soul. Later, they found Pong's phone, half smashed and covered in wet river mud. Its final video was only 7 seconds long, mostly static, except at the end, a brief glimpse of something moving backward between the trees. White dress, long hair, arms by her side, and at the very last frame, her feet, twisted, bent, dragging 2 shadows behind her. Behind the main hall of Wat Utai Temple, hidden beneath layers of time and dust, sat a forgotten altar. Not many knew it existed, wedged behind a cracked wooden screen, veiled with cobwebs and dried lotus petals. The monks never mentioned it. The novices were told to ignore the room entirely. But on the 4th morning after Veena's return, Suni went straight there. She moved through the shadows without hesitation, her bare feet silent on the cooled tiles. In her hands, she held a bundle of incense, a bell wrapped in cloth, and a faded scroll. She knelt before the altar. At its center was a shallow ceramic bowl, ringed with fine cracks. Inside, submerged in what looked like thick, yellowed oil, were 4 glass eyes. Each was milky. Each had thin black veins spiraling outward from the pupils like frost on a window pane. And each eye was cracked, not from age, but from something watching back. Suni didn't speak at first. She placed her palms together and bowed low, whispering a prayer in a language older than Thai. Then she opened the scroll. The parchment flaked at the edges, the ink faded, but the words remained. To bind what walks backward, one must blind her path. Feed the bowl with eyes that no longer see. When the 7th dawn breaks, hide or join her. It was an old ritual, one passed from whisper to whisper, mother to daughter, healer to heir. But something had gone wrong. The bowl was already full. That evening, a monk named Ajahn Tewa sought out Suni. He was not from Ban Utai, only visiting from Chiang Rai, but he had seen enough in his years to sense when something sacred had turned sour. "What did you awaken?" he asked softly. "No, she was never sleeping, only waiting," Suni replied, eyes distant. Ajahn Tewa studied the bowl, then the glyph etched into the altar beneath it, a spiraled knot wrapped in backward lines. "This is not a Buddhist symbol," he murmured. "It's older, animist, from before the river had a name." Then they heard it. Tap, tap, tap. From the temple gate, soft, uneven steps, growing louder, not toward the temple, but away from it,
as if someone was walking backward, step by slow, scraping step, dragging something behind. Suni's hand trembled. "She's closer," she whispered, "and someone must have looked again."
When the town realized no one was safe, not children, not elders, not even monks, the fear began to ferment. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it lived in the shadows, in the way doors were locked before dusk, in how everyone kept their curtains closed, even in daylight, and in how people began refusing to look at each other's feet. It was then that Somchai, a sculptor in his late 60s, came forward. He had lived in Ban Uthai all his life, known for carving guardian statues that lined temples across the province. Somchai's hands had once been steady, but lately they trembled constantly. Not from age, but from regret. "I saw her," he admitted quietly to Sune. "Years ago, before the chalk warnings, before people started disappearing. He had been drinking by the riverside, a fire by his feet, the sun not yet risen. He thought he saw a woman wandering the edge of the woods, walking backward, long hair trailing like smoke. He squinted, he laughed, and he looked. But she didn't take my eyes," he said. "Not then. She left me with the memory, and it's been rotting me from the inside ever since." He had drawn her 100 times, carved her shadow into driftwood, dreamed of her feet every night. Now he wanted peace, and he wanted to help. "If she takes eyes," he said, "maybe if I offer mine, she'll stop." They prepared the ritual at the shrine behind Wat Uthai. Under Sune's guidance, Somchai sat in the lotus position before the offering bowl, wrapped in white linen soaked with salt and rainwater. His carvings surrounded him, crude wooden guardians facing outward in a circle, their eyes hollow. A blade was placed beside the bowl. The scroll lay open, and in the distance the wind carried faint footsteps, soft, backward, growing closer. "Are you sure?" she asked. "She never stops with just one." But Somchai only nodded, then reached for the blade. The scream was heard across half the town, but it wasn't of pain, not entirely. It was a sound like relief and terror and surrender. When the villagers arrived at dawn, they found the shrine covered in salt lines and ashes. The bowl now held 6 glass eyes. Somchai was gone. No blood, no body. Only a carving left in his place, a wooden statue of a man with his face tilted downward and his feet twisted backward. Sune stood beside it, her lips pale, her hands shaking. She said, "He gave her what she wanted, but now she wants more." Because Somchai had looked too long, and she doesn't forgive obsession. She feeds on it. The morning after Somchai vanished, something changed in Ban Uthai. It wasn't just the silence, the kind that presses against your ears like thick cotton, or the way animals had begun to flee the edges of town. It was the smell, not of decay, not of rot, but of wet wood and river mud inside people's homes. Mats damp, walls streaked with smudges, footprints, barefoot, reversed, now inside bedrooms, kitchens, altars. And they weren't fading with time, they were spreading. It started with Mrs. Dang, a widow who lived across from the ferry station. At sunrise, she opened her front door and screamed. There, from the center of her living room leading straight to her altar, were 11 backward footprints pressed into the floorboards like heat marks. She scrubbed them, washed them with lemon and vinegar, even burned sage like Sune had taught her. But that night, she woke to a creaking sound. Step, step, drag. She turned, heart pounding, but there was no one there. Only her altar, lit with a strange glow, and a new offering had appeared. A glass eye, wit, still blinking. It wasn't hers, but it looked exactly like her late husband's. By the next evening, 10 households reported the same thing. Backward footprints, mud that wouldn't dry, and strange gifts, marbles, pearls, fish eyes, doll eyes, appearing beside their beds. It was mimicry. She was copying the ritual, mocking the offering, as if to say, "You gave me eyes, but I want feet now." Sune consulted old scrolls. She met secretly with Ajahn Tewa, who had begun carving symbols into the temple pillars for protection. What they uncovered sent chills down their spines. In pre-Buddhist folklore, there were spirits that punished through inversion. They cursed not by possessing the mind, but by turning the body inside out. A face that sees what it should not, and feet that walk where they were never meant to tread. One phrase kept repeating in every account: "She leaves no path behind, only footsteps forward into ruin." That night, a family of 4 disappeared. The Boonshaw family, who lived in the blue house near the rice fields, were last seen eating dinner together. In the morning, the food was untouched, the chairs still warm, and from the back door, a trail of muddy, backward prints led out into the fields. But it didn't stop there. Those who followed the prints discovered something horrifying. After 20 steps, the prints turned forward, as if whoever had been walking backward had turned around and was now walking toward town. When the Bunsha family vanished, the town finally stopped pretending. No more curfews, no more talismans, no more hoping she'd move on. They began digging, not just in fields, but into the town's forgotten past. It was Ajahn Tewa who uncovered the first clue. Inside the temple archives, hidden beneath a layer of rotting scrolls, was a brittle diagram, a map of Bon Uthai from over 100 years ago. Back then, the temple had been smaller, the river more narrow. But there, beneath the faded ink and smudged lines, was a marking no one recognized. Sacrificial well of Mae Torani, sealed by earth and bone. Suni whispered the name like a curse. Mae Torani, the river goddess. No, Ajahn Tewa said softly. Not the goddess, a rejected one. Following the map, they found it. Beneath a forgotten shrine to the rice god, Prafum, half buried under decades of dirt and weeds, they uncovered a circular ring of stone, not wide, but deep. The villagers remembered stories of a girl thrown into the well during a drought, how the elders, desperate for rain, sacrificed her at dawn, how she screamed for hours before her voice drowned below. But no one ever said her name, until now. Carved faintly into the stones, worn by time, were the words, "She walks, not to be seen, but to be known, and she drags the drought with her." Suni, Ajahn Tewa, and 3 others descended by rope, lanterns swinging with each breathless step. The walls of the well were wet with moss and something darker, something that stuck to their hands like ink. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Not a natural cold, a grief cold. At the bottom, they found bones. Not one body, many. Children, women, infants. The sacrifice hadn't been once, it had been ritual.
Each time the village suffered, they gave the well another offering. And each time she walked again. One wall of the well was different, smoother, carved with deliberate symbols. A spiral etched in reverse, surrounding a phrase painted in ochre. Walk her path and leave your name behind. That's when the lanterns flickered out, one by one. No wind, no breath, just darkness. And then, a sound. Step, step, drag. But this time it wasn't coming from above. It was coming from beneath the bone pile. Only Suni and Ajantewa made it out. The others, they were never found. Not even their ropes, only footprints leading upward along the inside of the well, backward. And when Suni collapsed, coughing mud and blood, she whispered through cracked lips, "Her feet aren't feet anymore. They're hands, reaching backward, grabbing, searching for the ones who buried her alive." After the descent into the well, something shifted in Bon Utai. Not just in the air, but in the bodies of the people. Those who had once scoffed at the tale, those who denied the sacrifices ever happened, those who covered the truth, said the missing were runaways, or ill, or cursed by bad karma. They began to change. The first was Chom, the town clerk, the man who once destroyed ancestral records to make space in the archive. He laughed at the old gods, told people May Torani was a myth made to control children. One morning, his wife found him in their garden, curled in the mud. His body twisted backward, not fully, but his feet no longer pointed the way they should. His ankles had reversed themselves, bones pushing through skin, toes turned behind him like a marionette facing the wrong direction. He couldn't speak. He could only sob and crawl, always backward, as if trying to return somewhere he couldn't name. By sunset, he had vanished. Only the smell of wet jasmine and river mud remained. Then came Prasit, the former teacher, who used to slap the hands of children who asked about the girl in the well. He began muttering nonsense during class, drawing circles on the blackboard, all in reverse. He bled from the ears by dusk, and by dawn he was gone. His shoes, however, were found standing perfectly at the gate of the school, with 2 backward footprints behind them pressed deep into the cement. One by one, the deniers were claimed. Their bodies didn't just disappear. They twisted, cracked, folded inward like broken dolls. Some left only nails behind. Others left bite marks on their own walls, teeth scraped into paint, backward and upward. Veena, still mute, drew what she saw in her room one night. A woman, long black hair, bent over completely backward, like her spine had snapped in half, crawling upside down on hands and feet, her head dangling beneath her body, grinning. She walks forward now, but her face still faces us. Suni and Ajahn Tewa prepared the next warding, not just for homes, but for people's bodies. They wrapped rice strings soaked in river clay around wrists and ankles, burned offerings from the well, lotus roots, baby teeth, and 7 pieces of broken combs, all dug from the bottom. But the curse wasn't satisfied with protection. It fed on remorse, not rituals. And in a horrifying revelation, They realized. The girl from the well wasn't punishing the innocent. She was returning every injury she ever received through the bodies of those who ignored her screams. Each dislocation, each bone cracked from the fall, each hour buried beneath soil and silence, she was replaying it inside them. If they wouldn't remember, then she'll make their bones remember for them.
It began just before dawn. A cold wind slithered through Bon Utai, even though no trees moved and no clouds stirred. Then, at exactly 4:44 a.m., the bells at Wat Utai Temple rang by themselves. No monks, no wind, no hands, only sound, low, mourning, as if the temple itself was afraid. Suni awoke gasping, hand clutching the salt pouch around her neck. Her walls were shaking, the floor was wet, not from rain, but from a fine mist seeping upward through the cracks, as if the earth beneath her house were exhaling. And in the mist, written on her mirror, not in chalk, not in dust, but in mud, was a single word, a name, Pra-Tavi. She froze. It was a name the village hadn't spoken in over 40 years, a monk, the youngest abbot Bon Utai had ever seen, charismatic, feared, revered, feared again, and vanished. Some said he left to study in the forest. Others claimed he drowned. But Suni knew the truth. He was the one who sealed the well, the one who chose the girl. The girl's name had long been forgotten. No records, no headstone, no mention in chants. But she had remembered his, because he had stood at the edge of the well, whispered blessings that were really curses, and when she screamed, he had looked away. Now the name Pra-Tavi was appearing everywhere, carved into school desks, etched into the bark of the Bodhi tree, written backward in condensation on kitchen windows, scribbled in children's notebooks, though no one taught them to write it. Ajahn Tewa stood at the temple gate, trembling. "She's not just haunting now, she's calling," he whispered. That night, a monk in training named Kam claimed he saw something inside the shrine. Not a ghost, not a woman, but a pair of feet, upside down, pressed against the ceiling beams, bare, wet, stained with rice husks and broken prayer beads, and above them, nothing. No legs, no body, only the sound of a girl breathing backward. He fled, bleeding from the nose, saying one thing before collapsing. "She walks inside the walls now." Suni and Ajahn Tewa prepared one last warding, this time not with salt or fire, but with memory. They gathered the elders, forced the silence to end, and finally, a woman named Jiranan confessed. Her name was Dionoi, she said, tears spilling. She was only 12 or 13. The rain hadn't come in months, the crops were dying, and the monk said if a pure girl walks backward into the well, the rain would follow. Pra-Tavi chose her. I held the candle. I heard her scream for 3 nights. But the name never came. Not for months. Because Dionoi had cursed them all, and she wasn't waiting for water anymore. She was waiting for Pra-Tavi. And he was still alive.
The villagers believed Pra-Tavi was long dead, but death, as they were learning, was no longer the end. The final clue came from an unlikely source, a cracked floor tile behind the Buddha statue in the old prayer hall, where no one dared to meditate anymore. During a stormy night, lightning struck the Bodhi tree outside. The ground trembled. and in the silence that followed, a month discovered the tile had shifted. Beneath it, a narrow staircase, and beneath the staircase, a door carved with reverse spirals and sealed with wax. Suni, Ajahn Tewa, and Jiranan descended together. Their lanterns barely lit the space, but what they saw could never be forgotten. A hidden chamber, circular, bare, and in the center, a single stone coffin bound with ropes braided from human hair. On the lid, carved in ancient script, "To break her silence, silence him first." Inside, wrapped in rotting saffron robes, lay a man, Pratavi, still breathing. His chest rose and fell in shallow, unnatural rhythm. His lips were stitched shut with black thread, and from the corners of his eyes, dried blood had pooled and hardened. But he was alive, trapped, bound by a ritual no one fully understood. "He sacrificed her," Suni whispered, "and in return she bound his life to hers, to carry his guilt one heartbeat at a time." He had lived for decades, entombed beneath the town, cursed to feel every scream she once cried, every backward step she now took, every eye she tore from the curious. And she wasn't walking toward vengeance anymore. She was walking back through time, unraveling memory, erasing mercy, rewriting pain. Suddenly, the lanterns flickered. The floor rippled as if they stood not on stone, but on a thin sheet of water. And then, the sound. Step, step, drag. But this time, it came from all directions, from the walls, from behind their eyes, from inside their thoughts. Jiranan began to choke, her voice shaking. "I see her when I blink. I see her walking backward through my childhood. I see her in the rice fields before they dried. I see her watching me before we chose her." Ajahn Tewa clutched his prayer beads, but they snapped in his hands, every bead breaking at once. Suni fell to her knees beside the coffin. "She doesn't want his death," she said. "She wants him to walk backward into what he did, to see it, to feel it, to become her." That's when the lid of the coffin began to crack, not from the outside, but from within. A hand, pale, soaked in river mud, and bent completely backward at the wrist, reached through the stone. Then another. But they weren't Pratavis. They were Daonoi's, or what was left of her. She was pulling herself out of him, like memory tearing through flesh. And as she rose, her face remained hidden. Only her feet were visible, twisted, inverted, sliding toward the light. "Don't look!" Suni screamed. "Don't look at her feet!" But Ajahn Tewa did, and his eyes rolled back. He smiled and whispered, "She's not the girl in the well anymore. She's the one who walks the years in reverse. And now she's coming for the first lie ever told."
Ban Utai no longer knew what time it was. Not in the way clocks told you, but in the way shadows behaved and didn't. The sun rose before the stars faded. Children woke up in houses they didn't recognize. Mothers called for sons who hadn't been born yet. The river flowed upstream. And in the heart of the town, near the sealed well, a tree bloomed with black flowers, though no one could recall planting it. Those who had seen her feet began to unravel first. Some walked backward without realizing it. Some began speaking in reverse. One man tried to dig up his own grave, even though he wasn't dead, not yet. But the worst was what happened to memory. People began forgetting names, then faces, then who they were. A woman sobbed in the market, holding a mirror, whispering, "I think I used to be someone's daughter, but now I only remember a well." Even temple murals began changing. The stories they once told of the Buddha, of the rain gods, of sacred animals were fading. In their place, a new figure emerged. A girl, walking backward, eyes closed, arms limp, and around her, the painted villagers all looked away, except one, a monk with no face. Suni locked herself in the apothecary with Ayan Tewa's scrolls. The man had not woken since Daonoi's hand rose from Pra Tavi's coffin. He now mumbled in sleep. Entire days played in reverse through his mouth. "She's undoing us," Suni muttered. "Not killing, not haunting, unmaking." But then she found it, at the bottom of a rotting scroll, barely readable. "The spiral remembers what you forgot." A diagram followed, a ritual of descent, not into the well, but into memory itself. A path, if walked backward, barefoot, under black jasmine smoke, could lead the soul to the moment of origin, where all curses begin, where names are still sharp, where Daonoi still screamed. Suni knew what it meant. She doesn't want revenge. She wants someone to remember the truth and feel what she felt, all of it. She packed salt, thread, river clay, and walked barefoot toward the shrine where Daonoi's name was never written. But this time, she stepped backward, 1 foot at a time. With each step, the world blurred. Time bent. The sky flickered. She passed the bakery before it was built, the school while it was still bamboo. She walked past herself, younger, laughing, then crying, then kneeling in front of the well at age 16. And finally, she reached the moment. The crowd, the chants, the ropes, the child. Daonoi, trembling, wrapped in white, eyes wide, looking directly at Suni, even though she wasn't really there. And Suni realized she had been there long ago. She was the girl holding the lantern, the one who turned away, the one who looked at her feet. And now it was time to stop walking, because behind her, in the space between time and guilt, Daonoi had arrived. The moment Suni stopped walking, the world went silent. Not the silence of night, not the hush of prayer, but a silence so deep she could hear her own heartbeat cracking like wood in a fire. Daonoi stood before her, barefoot, still, expressionless. Her long black hair clung to her damp cheeks as if it had never dried since the day she was thrown into the well. Her body hadn't aged, but her eyes had. They looked ancient, not in years, but in pain. Suni dropped to her knees. She couldn't speak, because what do you say to the one you helped destroy? So instead, she offered. First, the salt, poured in a circle around Daonoi's feet. Then the thread, soaked in river clay, tied around her own wrists and ankles. Finally, she lit the lantern.
the same kind she once held decades ago, and held it out with both hands. "This time," Suni whispered, "I look with open eyes, and I don't look away." Dawanoi's lips moved. No sound came out, only steam rising like breath from a broken kettle. She raised her hand, slowly, and pointed at Suni's feet. Suni nodded. She removed her sandals, pressed her heels to the wet earth, and stood barefoot in the salt circle. "Take them," she said. "Take what you need, not to punish, but to remember." Dawanoi stepped forward, and her feet made no sound, not even the wet slap of skin, not even the crunch of salt, only the whisper of wind moving backward. She knelt, placed her backward hands on Suni's ankles, and closed her eyes. And for a moment, just a breath, the world stopped rewinding. The trees held still. The stars flickered into place. The river paused mid-current, and Suni saw it all. She saw the rope, the terror, the moment Dawanoi realized no one would save her, the dark walls of the well, the prayers whispered above not to help her, but to forget her. And worst of all, she saw herself, holding the lantern, looking down, then walking away. That was the curse. Not death, not pain, the walking away. When Suni opened her eyes, Dawanoi was no longer there. Only the lantern remained, still lit, floating mid-air for just a second, before it slowly descended into the dirt, and beside it, pressed into the earth, 2 barefoot footprints. But this time, they pointed forward. And Suni wept, because for the first time since Dawanoi had risen, she had stopped walking backward. The spiral had broken. The bells at Wat Utai rang at dawn by human hands. The river flowed true. The names returned. The murals repainted themselves. But Ban Utai would never forget again. Because every year, on the first day of rain, a lantern is lit at the mouth of the well, not to ward off a curse, but to say, "We saw her, and this time we didn't look away."